You know that feeling when someone walks into a room and every head turns, when their presence alone seems to shift the entire energy of a space? What if I told you that this magnetic pull isn't random at all, but the result of deep psychological mechanisms that Sigmund Freud spent decades studying? The father of psychoanalysis discovered 6 unmistakable signs that reveal when someone finds you absolutely irresistible, signals that speak directly to our most primitive unconscious mind. These aren't shallow tricks or superficial tactics, but profound psychological truths rooted in our ancestral brain patterns. When you learn to recognize these behaviors, you'll not only understand attraction dynamics better, but develop an awareness that can completely transform your relationships. The first signal is so subtle that most people miss it entirely, yet it's happening right in front of their eyes every single day. When someone can't help but look at you, even when they shouldn't, you're witnessing what Freud called unconscious libidinal investment. This isn't simple surface-level interest, but a deep mechanism that completely bypasses rational thinking. Picture yourself in a coffee shop working on your laptop. You notice someone at a nearby table who keeps stealing glances at you while pretending to read their book. Their eyes land on you for just a few seconds too long, then quickly dart away when they realize you might have caught them. This pattern repeats throughout your entire time there. Freud explained this behavior through the concept of scopophilic drive, the unconscious desire to visually possess and consume the object of desire. When someone is deeply attracted to you, their unconscious takes control, compelling them to continuously seek your image as a source of gratification. It's a completely automatic process that happens below the threshold of awareness. This prolonged gazing has specific characteristics. It's never directly frontal for too long, because that would trigger the person's rational defenses. Instead, it follows a pattern of approach and withdrawal, like a predator studying its prey. Their eyes follow your movements, your expressions, trying to capture every detail. From a neurological standpoint, this behavior activates the brain's reward system. Every time that person looks at you, their brain releases small doses of dopamine, creating an actual visual addiction. It's the same mechanism that drives us to compulsively check our phones or seek gratification through social media. But there's an even deeper element according to Freudian theory. This gaze represents an attempt at symbolic incorporation. On an unconscious level, that person is trying to possess you through sight, to make you part of their internal psychological world. Have you ever noticed this pattern in someone observing you? Have you ever seen this behavior in yourself when attracted to someone? The second signal reveals how our body language betrays desires that our rational mind desperately tries to hide. When someone begins spontaneously mimicking your gestures, your posture, or even your breathing rhythm, you're observing one of the most powerful phenomena in human attraction, unconscious mirroring. Freud defined this as a primitive form of identification, an unconscious attempt to symbolically merge with the object of desire. Imagine you're at dinner with someone who interests you. Without realizing it, you rest your elbow on the table and lean slightly to the left. After a few seconds, you notice the person across from you assumes the same position. When you take a sip of water, shortly after they do the same. When you cross your arms, they cross theirs too. This isn't coincidence, but a deep, unconscious mechanism. According to Freudian psychoanalysis, imitation represents the most primitive stage of falling in love. When we're deeply attracted to someone, our unconscious seeks to incorporate them through bodily mimesis. It's as if our brain says, I want to become like this person, to possess them emotionally. This behavior has ancient evolutionary roots. Our ancestors used mirroring to create social bonds and increase survival chances. But in romantic attraction, it takes on a much more complex dimension. The person mimicking you is unconsciously attempting to create emotional synchrony, a psychological bridge that connects them directly to your inner experience. The phenomenon is so powerful that it occurs even at micro-expressive levels. If you smile slightly, their facial muscles automatically activate to replicate your expression. If you touch your face, after a few seconds, they'll make the same gesture. This process completely bypasses the rational mind and taps directly into the collective unconscious. But pay attention, not all types of imitation indicate attraction. Authentic mirroring has specific characteristics. It's always slightly delayed 2 to 4 seconds, never perfectly synchronized. It's unconscious. If you point out the behavior, the person becomes confused and immediately stops. It's selective. They don't imitate all your gestures, but only those their unconscious chooses as significant. Freud explained this phenomenon through the concept of projective identification. The person attracted to you unconsciously projects part of their identity onto you, attempting to create symbolic fusion. It's an extremely intimate process that reveals a deep desire for emotional connection. From a practical standpoint, when you recognize this signal, you're observing someone who has completely lowered their psychological defenses. Their unconscious has already accepted you as a love object, even if their rational mind isn't yet aware of it. Have you ever noticed someone unconsciously imitating your movements? How did you feel when you realized it? The third signal is even more subtle, and revealing it concerns how our unconscious claims the space around the beloved person. There exists an invisible space around every person, a protective bubble that our primitive brain considers sacred. When someone gradually begins invading this space, getting closer than necessary on every occasion, you're observing what Freud defined as sublimated territorial aggression, a primitive instinct seeking intimacy through physical proximity. Imagine finding yourself in an elevator with 5 other people. There's sufficient space to maintain respectful distance, yet one specific person chooses to position themselves right next to you, almost brushing against you. Or during a group conversation, you notice someone continuously moving closer, reducing the distance between you until creating an intimacy almost inappropriate for the social context. According to Freudian theory, this behavior stems from conflict between the conscious desire to respect social conventions and the unconscious drive to create physical intimacy. The unconscious uses rational excuses. I need to reach something behind you. I didn't hear you well. There's better light here to justify the approach, but the real reason is seeking emotional connection through bodily proximity. This phenomenon follows precise rules. The person never invades your space aggressively or intrusively, because that would trigger your defense mechanisms. Instead, they use what Freud called gradual seduction, each time moving a few centimeters closer, testing your reaction. If you show no signs of discomfort, they interpret this as unconscious consent and continue the approach. From a neurobiological perspective, physical proximity activates oxytocin release, the bonding hormone. When someone positions themselves in your intimate zone, less than 18 inches, your brain automatically interprets this as a signal of emotional intimacy, even if rationally there's no romantic relationship. But the most revealing signal is strategic positioning. The person attracted to you systematically seeks to occupy positions that put them in your visual field, even when unnecessary. If you move, after a few minutes, you find them again in your line of sight. It's as if their unconscious has developed an emotional radar that drives them to always remain in your psychological orbit. Freud interpreted this behavior as a form of emotional territorial marking. On an unconscious level, that person is communicating to others. This is my special person. I have the privilege of being close to them. It's a primitive possessiveness instinct, seeking to exclude potential rivals. Be careful, though. Invasion of personal space is authentic only when accompanied by other attraction signals. A person might approach for dominance, manipulation, or simply lack of manners. The authentic Freudian signal is recognizable by its delicacy. It's always a soft approach that allows you to move away if desired. Have you ever noticed someone systematically seeking your physical proximity, even in situations where it wasn't necessary? The fourth signal is even more intriguing because it concerns how the unconscious seeks to create secret complicity with you. There's a magical moment in human attraction when two people find themselves sharing the same gaze toward a third situation, creating instant intimacy that excludes the rest of the world. Freud defined this phenomenon as unconscious alliance, a primitive attempt to create an us against them that cements emotional bonding through complicity. Imagine being at a party when something slightly embarrassing happens. Someone trips, a waiter drops a tray, or the host tells a particularly questionable joke. In that moment, you instinctively look for someone to share your reaction with. If a specific person actively seeks your gaze in these moments, trying to establish complicit eye contact, you're observing an extremely powerful attraction signal. According to Freudian psychoanalysis, this behavior represents an attempt to create what he called a shared transitional object. In practice, that person is using the external situation to create a direct emotional bridge with you, transforming a random moment into a shared, intimate experience. The mechanism is extremely sophisticated. Their unconscious carefully selects the right moments, never during serious conversations or overly formal situations, but always on occasions where complicity would be natural and appropriate. It's as if they've developed an emotional timer that instinctively recognizes when it's the perfect moment to seek your connection. This complicit gaze has unique characteristics. It always lasts a few seconds longer than normal, creating micro-intimacy that temporarily excludes everything else. It's accompanied by micro-facial expressions, a slight eyebrow raise, a hint of smile, a small grimace that communicate only we two truly understand what's happening here. From a neurological perspective, these moments of complicity activate the brain's social reward system, releasing endorphins and creating a sense of mutual belonging. It's the same mechanism that makes us feel closer to someone after sharing an intense or fun experience, but the deepest signal is shared memory. After these moments of complicity, that person will tend to recall them in future conversations. Do you remember when? Or it was funny when. This isn't simple nostalgia, but an unconscious attempt to relive and strengthen the emotional bond created in that instant of connection. Freud explained this phenomenon through the concept of positive projective identification. The person attracted to you projects their most intimate feelings onto the external situation, transforming it into a symbol of your special connection. It's as if they're telling their unconscious, this person and I are on the same wavelength, we understand the same things. The behavior is particularly revealing when it happens in groups. If in a multi-person conversation, someone systematically seeks your gaze to share their reactions, even when others might be more logical conversation partners, it means their unconscious has already identified you as a special person. Have you ever experienced these moments of silent complicity with someone? How did you feel when you realized they always sought your gaze? The fifth signal is even more subtle and concerns how our unconscious emotionally claims a person through behavior that might seem contradictory. When someone who is normally confident suddenly becomes nervous, clumsy, or anxious only in your presence, you're observing what Freud defined as libidinal investment anxiety, the nervousness that arises when the unconscious recognizes a love object so important that it fears losing it before even having conquered it. Imagine a colleague who during meetings is always articulate, confident, brilliant in presentations. Yet when you find yourselves alone in an elevator or working together on a project, they suddenly become awkward. They stutter slightly, forget words, drop things, blush for no apparent reason. This behavioral contrast isn't coincidence, but manifestation of deep psychological conflict. According to Freudian theory, when we're deeply attracted to someone, our unconscious activates what he called protective self-sabotage mechanism. In practice, the most primitive part of our psyche fears rejection so much that it prefers creating small obstacles, small imperfections, to test if the other person will accept us despite everything. This nervousness has very specific characteristics. It's not generalized anxiety, but selective. It emerges only in your presence or when talking about you. The person can be perfectly comfortable with everyone else, but when entering your emotional field of influence becomes vulnerable, authentic, almost childlike. The phenomenon manifests through small signals, hands trembling slightly while holding a coffee cup, voice cracking imperceptibly, gestures slower and less coordinated than usual. It's as if your presence short-circuits their normal social control mechanisms, returning them to a state of primitive vulnerability. From a neurobiological standpoint, this happens because intense attraction simultaneously activates the sympathetic system excitement and parasympathetic system relaxation, creating a neurochemically conflicted storm. The brain receives contradictory signals. This person is important, we must make a good impression, but also this person appeals to us, we can lower our defenses, but the most revealing signal is overcompensation. After a moment of nervousness, that person will tend to react with excessive effort to appear normal, confident, in control. It's as if they unconsciously apologize for showing vulnerability, attempting to rebuild their social image. Freud interpreted this behavior as a form of temporary regression. When we're in love, our unconscious partially regresses to more primitive emotional states, where expressing vulnerability was a way to obtain protection and care. It's an evolutionary mechanism. Showing weakness to someone who interests us can trigger their protective instinct. Be careful though, this nervousness is authentic only when spontaneous and uncontrollable. Some people can fake vulnerability to manipulate, but genuine nervousness is recognizable because the person seems surprised and slightly annoyed by their own reaction. It's as if they think, why am I behaving like this? The signal is particularly powerful when the person normally has strong emotional control. If someone you know as confident, competent, always self-possessed becomes nervous only with you, their unconscious is communicating something very deep to you. Have you ever noticed someone who changed behavior only in your presence, becoming more nervous or clumsy than usual? The last signal is the most powerful of all because it concerns how the unconscious seeks to symbolically mark the relationship with you. The sixth and most powerful signal of unconscious attraction manifests when someone systematically begins seeking ways to create shared memories or preserve objects that symbolically connect you. Freud defined this phenomenon as fetishistic investment, the unconscious attempt to materialize emotional bonding through tangible symbols that can survive physical absence. Imagine during a coffee break, someone casually comments, "We should definitely watch that movie we were talking about together," or "Next time you go to that bookstore, we could go together." These aren't simple social invitations, but unconscious attempts to weave a network of shared future experiences that create emotional continuity. But the most revealing behavior concerns small objects. That person begins accidentally forgetting their things, where they know you'll find them a pen, book, accessory, or asks to borrow something of yours, even when they don't really need it. According to Freud, these objects become emotional fetishes, symbolic bridges that maintain active connection even when physically separated. The mechanism is extremely sophisticated. The unconscious always selects objects that have some emotional relevance or can justify future contact. It's never about trivial things, but elements that create legitimate excuse to meet again or think about the other person. From a psychoanalytic perspective, this behavior represents what Freud called construction of adult transitional objects. Like children attached to stuffed animals or blankets to manage separation anxiety, adults in love unconsciously create a network of objects and memories that serve as symbolic consolation in the beloved person's absence. The phenomenon extends to photos too. If someone begins taking pictures when you're together, even on occasions where it wouldn't be natural, or asks for selfies in casual situations, their unconscious is attempting to capture and preserve the shared experience. Each photo becomes an emotional relic, tangible proof that the bond exists, but the deepest signal is shared narrative. That person begins building a story of your interactions, remembering specific details from previous conversations, citing things you said weeks before, creating narrative continuity that transforms casual encounters into chapters of a meaningful relationship. This behavior has a precise evolutionary function. In our ancestors, the ability to create symbolic bonds and preserve shared memories increased chances of maintaining important alliances over time. The modern unconscious uses the same strategy to emotionally secure a person considered precious. The search for shared memories also manifests through future references, when we go instead of if we go, or next time, taken for granted that there will be a next time. It's as if the unconscious is actively programming a shared future. Freud explained this phenomenon through the concept of conservative libido, the psychic energy that seeks to preserve and protect emotional investments through material symbols and structured memories. When you recognize this behavior, you're observing someone who has unconsciously decided you're important enough to merit long-term emotional investment. Have you ever noticed someone systematically seeking to create memories or preserve objects connected to you two? These aren't superficial tricks, but deep truths about how human attraction functions. Freud taught us that the unconscious always communicates, even when the rational mind tries to hide its feelings. Now that you know these signals, you have extraordinary power, the ability to read the deepest desires of people around you. But the most important question is, which of these behaviors have you recognized in yourself when attracted to someone? What city are you watching from? Drop a comment below and let me know where our community of human psyche explorers is tuning in from. If this touched you in some way, hit that like button and subscribe to the channel for more insights into the mysteries of the mind.